Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. I'm here with Brett for another episode of our podcast, Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C. And today we are going to talk about aircraft components and the aircraft components market. And we are going to talk about it with Nicholas Bock. Nicholas, welcome. Thank you for your time today and for joining
Thank
us
you.
in our podcast.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Appreciate your guys' time and everything you do. I think this is wonderful, and I look forward to all the discussion questions you have for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the first one, I always start with this because I'm curious to know how people get into aviation and why. Why
Right.
aviation? What is wrong with you?
What is wrong? That's yeah. I feel like I should ask that question to other people in that way, in that manner in the industry. Give them a good shake. Why? No. It's very interesting to me ever since I was a kid. I always had like little RC kit planes and rockets and things like that. So from an early age, just flight and then living close to Cape Canaveral and seeing space shuttle launches and things like that. It just the aeronautics in itself, it's just a very interesting field. And with that, it's always changing, and you're always trying to learn from other people. You're learning as you're taking courses. So I would say, in short, I was leaving the military, and I was asking my peers and my command feedback on what is sort of the stepping stone in life. Where do I go? What do I do? Right? And they told me something that kind of stuck with me, and they said, stick to what you know. Stick to what you know and what you like to do every day, and you'll never work a day in your life. And you hear that sort of thing over and over. So yeah, I left the military after 6 years in the Coast Guard. I went back to Florida, and I studied aircraft mechanics. Went to A&P school for 2 years, got certified, and then I went on to Valencia College, and I got my AA there, and then I went on to Embry-Riddle. I studied aeronautics there, and then I went and got my IA years later in 2021. So this was starting from 2014, and then getting the IA in 2021 and finishing the A&P around 2016. And then from there, I was like, okay, I want more. What's the next thing? You get to an age, you're like, okay, well, what's the next level up? Where do I go from here? So I created my own company. It's been dissolved now, but then I created two more companies after that. But I started to work on people's planes, and then I eventually got into sales and then management.
Wow. Okay. Quite interesting. Why it's not related to aviation, the Coast Guard?
hmm Yeah, no, it's unrelated, but I was a mechanic, and it's such a small branch. It's only 40,000 people. There's more cops in New York City than there is the whole branch of the Coast Guard. That's a fact.
Wow.
So when you're in those roles, you're going to be placed in situations that are very uncomfortable. You're going to be doing search and rescue cases. You're going to be training every day. You're going to be dealing with the elements and different people. So you're going to be like, in my role, I was doing, procurement of parts. I was a mechanic. I was working
Mhm.
on boats. I was doing maritime law enforcement. I was handling logistics. So you're doing five roles, encapsulated into one thing, and you're going through all different types of rigorous training, tactical training, learning about maritime law. It's very interesting. There's a lot to learn, and somebody that wants to do that as a 20-year career path, by all means, do so. But I had the opportunity to go to school and have it paid for, and that was one of the many reasons that I wanted to join, was because then I could say, okay, I could stay here and I could be comfortable, or I can take a risk on myself and invest in myself and see where that leads me.
Yeah, very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it was kind of a preparation for the aviation world.
Yeah, of course. And once you get to that level of, the what when we get into the part discussion, is you start to learn that you don't really know as much as you think you know. And then when you go into interviews and you're like, okay, I need this I'm going to go after this big boy job, so to speak, right? And you're talking with people that have already been in the industry for 40 years. Their depth of knowledge is, if you feel like it's 100 years worth of knowledge, because it's so much vast information. So one of my instructors, when I was getting my A&P, he said, when you get your A&P license, it's essentially a ticket to learn. He's like, you're not going to learn everything in the 2,100 hours that you're here. You're getting a ticket to learn. And that ticket shows that you have the aptitude to do the job properly and to follow procedures and manuals. And that's what it is. So that really resonated with me very much. And he would also talk about people in aviation that have done more than just turning wrenches, like inventing things and coming up with new ideas, very very aggressive ways of thinking about it, not just saying, I can just go here and fix this plane. It's to say, like, I'm going to solve real world problems, and there's more out there than just what's presented in front of you.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, it's aviation. Once you get into it, it's very interesting environment because, like you say, you're always learning. There's such a vast amount of knowledge to take in and to instill in with people and just, I mean, no one person will ever know it all, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
you dig in as deep as you like and go from there, right?
Yeah, and you find once you get to that professional level that everyone has their own niche in the market.
Mhm.
If you go to NBAA, MRO Americas, go to the PB Expo or eBase, talk to anybody there, and just try to figure out, well, who are you and what does your business do? And most likely they're going to say, well, we have divans and interiors, and that's all we do is interiors for jets. And you're like, nothing else? And they're like, nope, that's it. But because it's only just they're honed in on their craft so well that they are excelling beyond anybody else that could possibly try to manage interiors and engines and gears and so many different things. So it's very interesting that it's not to say like, okay, they're just compartmentalizing themselves into just that. It's that they've cornered the market. That's their part of the market. So there might only be 4 competitors, and they don't see them as competitors. They just see them as other interior shops that just feed off of each other, so to speak. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I find like you mentioned the word niche. A lot of these organizations, I find the guys that run them, they're so dialed into exactly what they do that they're such a vast wealth of knowledge that nobody is ever going to know everything there is about aircraft or aviation, and so it's been my experience that you really need to draw on the wealth of knowledge of these people because the first thing I'll do if I'm looking at redoing my interior, my aircraft, using that example, I'm going to call a couple of these shops that's their specialty, right? Because they should know all the answers and certification, whatever the case might be. Like it's not when a person conjures up the image of an interior shop, quite often you think about, oh, somebody's putting reupholstering a chair or something, right? But I mean, there's so much more science that goes into it. And a lot of people don't even realize that. So you're better off going to these specialty shops where they've seen it all, they've dealt with it. They know exactly what you're talking about or what it is you're after when you don't even know what it is you're after.
Yeah, 100%. And being an inspector myself, sometimes I have CEOs of other companies that are like, hey, I got this windshield and it came in this way, and he shows me the photos, and what is your opinion? What would you do in this scenario, if you received it in this way? And it's like, well, go back to them, go back to the people you got it from, ask them for a teardown report. If they're not responsive, go to another MRO, go to a specialty shop that deals specifically with windshields every day, because if you call the FISDO, their job is making sure that everybody's in compliance, that you're all following procedures, right? Everyone has their technical CMM open. Okay, good. but in the real world where things are broken every day, that just leave it to the experts. That's my advice. I'll I like to direct people. It doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't cost them anything, but I always see it as I'm investing into a relationship, right?
Yeah.
I'm spreading the seeds out everywhere. So people that come to me are like, wow, you're so knowledgeable or insightful and you're a great resource. So it's not to say like I want to be like, take. A lot of people, it's like, what can I gain for myself, right? I just need this to make this short-term sale. I don't like to look at it that way, and I don't think that people like to be sold on anything either. If you want to discuss sales specifically, I think that people they need a solution. They need the highest quality they can get at the best price. But if you're going to them as like the guy knocking on the door to sell them nice shiny knives, they're going to say, no, 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 go away, right? But
Yeah.
if you cater to their needs at the highest level, I can guarantee you 100% they're going to be passing your number to 10 other people they
Yeah.
know, and they're going to be like, hey, call that guy. He's going to help you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because we are all, the majority of us, I think, in aviation, we are here for the long run and for also the bigger picture. I mean, obviously, we all have to make a living, but the bigger picture is to create a nice aviation environment where everybody can thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, components. How did you get into aircraft components?
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. I was an A&P working at an avionics shop in Orlando. I was at Orlando Executive, and it's a very, very busy environment. There's a lot going on. There's lots of people to network with. There's lots of doctors and lawyers, and everyone needs help with their planes. And so when I got my first gig, I started seeing parts coming in, and their policy was we're only going to install just new parts. That's it. We only want to install new because we don't want to have any issues with used parts. So I said, okay. And I would ask my boss, oh, well, how much does that cost? Or what are we charging for this? I knew that eventually I wanted to be a manager or a director of maintenance of, some capacity. So I wanted to start dialing into that. And when I started seeing the numbers of, oh, well, that windshield from Cessna was 100,000, I thought, oh, wow, that's a lot. That's a very high asset component. So I was working with the parts physically, and then I started reaching out to people that needed work on planes, and then I just stumbled upon a sales rep position. And so when I first met them at AC Shares, the owner, very, very nice gentleman, very, very nice establishment, very clean. I could tell they were very particular on the quality and the way that they did business. And I could see the sweat equity that was put into the company. So I was like thrilled to get the opportunity. But I let them know, like, hey, I'm a very creative person. I always like to think outside the box, and they're like, that's the kind of person we need. So 6 months later, I became the sales manager, and it progressed from there. It was just astounding to see it grow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So initially you worked for an organization that I'm curious that their preference was only to install new parts, or in that environment at least you were. How
Right.
did you progress into the used part market?
Yeah. So when I shifted gears and I left to the other position, at that time they had 2 to 3 citations, and they were previously Part 91 owners. We'd sold off the engines, and so we had the airframes left to part out. And they said, so when I came in, I was still turning wrenches and selling at the same time. And then it became so I was doing it so efficiently that they said, no, 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 we only want you on the phone. Like just sell. That's it. Because the way it was only like 3 of us, so I was like, I could do that. So yeah, I just kind of broke into, I only had like 4,000 lines of inventory, and I had these 3 planes to part out, and most of everything was just as removed condition. And I was learning about the different condition codes, and I was learning about the different types of shops that were buying our parts. So like every other day it was something new. I mean, every day was something new, and it was like, what's a camp report? Like I had gone through school for 2 years, never saw a camp report. So he goes, so these are all your life limit parts. And I go, okay, this makes perfect sense. And he's like, this is how you can see if it's, unconditioned. You can see here if when this part component was overhauled, and this is how many current cycles are on it. So that's just, I just kind of fell into it, to be honest. Just sort of just happened that way. And then it flourished once we started bringing in more and more planes.
In your experience, so about aircraft parts, what do you think is the biggest gap that aviation professionals should understand that is not clear?
Yeah, that's something that's weighing on the aftermarket buyers and sellers a lot. And what you see is that if you look at it from the standpoint of an OEM, right? They're looking at what's the means of production. They need to produce product. They need to produce next generations of products. They need to supersede to what's the latest and greatest model, right? So you wouldn't have necessarily, you don't want to have the same tech and the same design of a Toyota Corolla in the 90s operating in 2025, right? Enhance it with autonomy and software and all these things. So when that happens, these older parts, they become obsolete. The OEM doesn't want to expend the energy anymore to support these items, right? It's legacy parts. So now there's all these people that are 135s and Part 91, and they're just clamoring to ILS, Locatory, Parts Base, E-Plane, AV Spares, anything they can get their hands on, right? And not all of the suppliers are out there advertising what they have either. Some are a little bit more like the old style brick and mortar boneyard. Hey, call us, ask if I got it, right? They don't want to pay 10 grand for the subscription. So like, people know who I am. I don't need to pay 10 grand for people to know. They'll find me. Then you have the others that are actively paying, huge amounts of money to get 100,000 plus impressions a day on their services or their products they're selling. But the thing is that there's a huge misconception, or there's a huge gray area with parts where, like, you see people listing things and then they don't have them anymore, and it becomes discouraging. And you're thinking, why is that happening? And there's just not enough PMA parts being produced. There's not enough. The aftermarket doesn't have a bunch of manufacturers in the background feeding into it. It's simply aircraft are getting timed out, chopped up, and then that's when a flood of part comes in, floods of parts. But when that happens, you see these huge spikes and dips. So I've actually seen those charts, those supply and demand charts, and you see where all of a sudden there's a huge influx of, let's say, Hawkers or Lear 60s. And now the market's just way oversaturated and it's selling like crazy. And when it falls hard. I mean, it falls right off. And I was getting 50,000 views a month on my inventory when I was selling, and I was getting 7,000 RFQs every 30 days. I was getting hugely inundated with requests. And it was sad because I couldn't cater to everyone's needs because there's just only so many parts on a plane, right? You might only have, let's say it has 4 servos, and then some guy knows that, hey, that's a hot part. I'm going to just buy them all. So you list it, and the next day it's gone. And then for 2 months, you get people asking for that one particular thing, and it's like, oh, sorry, I already sold it to so and so. It's just it's gone. You're gonna have to find another vendor that has it. So there's there's a big gap, and it's not being filled, and for reasons that are above my pay grade. But we can see that obviously you have a CJ4 or a new type of Falcon that's on its 4th generation, right? So older Honeywell, older Collins stuff is just not getting catered to. Honeywell is taking away a lot of the capability to repair it. And so when that happened, I started to think, well, how can I fix all the legacy parts? And it's very difficult to do. You got to find a channel partner or a government contractor. You got to find whatever you can do to try to get things that were manufactured in the 80s fixed and
Mm.
get back into that legacy aircraft. It takes a lot of lead time that people aren't willing to wait either.
So with all of the parts, I mean, generally, are you finding that they're removed serviceable parts, or are they being recertified?
Yeah,
I'm presuming
so
that's what you're talking about by routing them through a shadow organization.
yeah, you've got a mix of different things going on. So let's say I don't want to give names of vendors away to put them down in any way, but some are buying incident related planes because that, it was a good deal and that was all they could get, right? So
Mhm.
in that case, every single part needs to be bench checked or overhauled before it gets reinstalled. As soon as you pull a part, it's no longer a serviceable part. It's
Mhm.
automatically an as removed part. So even though it was removed working, it's in serviceable condition. According to the FAA, you're going to have to recertify it before you put it back into the next plane. But there is a little gray area when it comes to traceability and things that are just as is or as removed. But for the sake of charters, if it's a 135 charter, they're just going to have an 8130. It's going to have to say inspected in accordance with XYZ manual, or it's going to have to be overhauled, maybe because now it's beyond the life limit. So what you're seeing is that even though there's some planes that are being parted out that are actually still flying planes that are still out there in the fleet, they're perfectly good parts. Uh, it's just that there's a lot of overhead that goes into it, and the overhead can be huge, because you figure, like, I used to pay around 20,000 at least minimum to get a plane chopped up and moved, just like
Mm.
one state over. Let's say it was a whole nother country, right? I had a 560 XL chopped up and brought over, and that was more like high 20s, and that was a good deal because some places here in the States might charge you 50 grand, especially if it's a bigger plane. They
Mhm.
might charge you, let's say you wanted to chop up a bigger Gulfstream or something from California and bring it to Florida. Yeah, for sure. It's going to be 50 grand. So now you've got 50 grand just to chop it up and move it. Then you've got workers, you've got structure, you've got insurance. So there's so much overhead before the part can even get removed and put out to the market. It's incredible.
In the Canadian market, um, the market for removed as is rather limited, I would think, because here, basically, depending on the nature of the component, you need a Form 1 or an 8130.
Right.
And we strongly discourage as is parts. They've got to have a history that, you've
Mm.
got to know what the status is, and so they're routed through a shop. But what I have seen exactly what you're talking about, where people do buy up inventories. Somebody sells an aircraft. I myself, we sold a Challenger 600, and
Okay.
we had an inventory to dispose of, right? So now you try to get it out there. A lot of people know, they watch for these aircraft sales, and once they see that you've sold an aircraft or you've got one for sale, you start getting phone calls, not just about the aircraft, but about the potential of whether you have an inventory or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so then you can start getting offers on your inventory as well. Usually it's about 10 cents on the dollar, I find. But nonetheless, and there too, your inventory value depends on what certification you have with it and what the status of the parts are too, right? And a lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah, pricing is very difficult, and people have asked me a lot, Nick, how do you price your parts? How do you do it? And so I like to break it down into a face value going into it, saying, okay, if it's as removed, I want to get 20 to 30% of the retail. Or let's say the fleet is smaller and the parts are more high dollar, I'm going to want closer to maybe 40, 50% of new price, maybe even more than that if there's just nothing out there and it's a really expensive part. I've actually sold a part that, it had a few thousand landings on it and it still sold for the new price at
Yeah.
Mm.
$62,000 because there's just zero in the market. So yeah, pricing is very competitive, and you get a false sense of what you think the reality is going to be too. Like you'll go like I parted out a Challenger 601 myself, and I was going into it thinking, okay, maybe 20 to 35%. And it wasn't the case. I went to my rep at Parts Base and I gave him the list of parts and I said, here, give me a market demand report on said parts. And it came back and parts were only selling at 10 to 15% of the new price, even though the parts were valued really high coming from the OEM. They just weren't selling for that. It was just too much out there, and just not enough people just buying those parts. So I went to that CFO of the company that we were parting the plane out for, and I had the meeting, and I have that hard discussion saying, "Hey, so and so, we have to come to like 15% or less. It's just we can't sell above 15% on it."
Mm-hmm.
And with certain OEMs, they have unwritten rules too, and by that I mean the margin that they make. So I can't mark it up too high either, because if I sell it for, let's say, 50% of half the new price, they've got to put 20, 30% on top of my 50%. So if I'm quoting it at, let's say, 70, 80, they're going to be at 100. Their client's going to be like, why are you charging me full price? This thing we all know it's an overhauled part, right? It's probably not going to be the owner. Most likely it's going to be the person that's the manager of that plane, or the procurement officer, or the director of maintenance that's going to be contesting that price, saying, well, we're not paying that. I don't care if which OEM you are, right? We're not going to pay new for something with 5,000 cycles on it. So it's really smash and grab environment.
Yeah, and I find also in the components market, the vast majority depends on the rarity of it as well, right? I mean, for instance, if you have a component, I think one example where we had a horizontal stab actuator. Well, there was only one place in the world that can overhaul them, and it was like a 9-month wait for them, and there are none on the market to be had. So if you've got one with any time remaining on it, it was worth a fortune. Otherwise, you get in line and wait for 9 months.
That's absolutely true, and I've gotten the quotes myself. I've sold quite a few HTAP actuators, and I've sold them as removed at 35,000, and I've gotten quotes to overhaul them at 109,000.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, if I just sell it and get rid of it quickly, he can throw it in his plane until it's not good anymore. At least he's paying a third of the price, and he's just kind of paying for extended time, right? At that point, he's buying himself time, because then he can send his out. He'll pay the absorbent cost, because it wouldn't make sense for me to rent something to him that's just going to time out anyways. So that's a whole nother deep dive discussion. And when you talk about renting parts, that's not normal. It's not normal at all. But we've done it. It's just that you have to do it carefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you get into a commercial environment like a 135 or a 121 operation, that becomes questionable as well. I mean, they've got to have their own processes and procedures in place for control of that, right? So.
Oh yeah.
So I think we're talking about the North American market, but do you have any insights on the European market? Are those problems also present there? I don't know if you have any insights on that.
Yeah, I've had clients in Germany, UK, Brazil, Mexico, China. I want to say areas of Malaysia and Hungary. I actually went to Hungary as well, and Italy. And their standards in Germany, for instance, their standards, I think, are that it goes through more scrutiny than here, to be honest. Their inspectors are very strict about paperwork, about how it looks, how it feels, everything. And they're going to let you know right away. If there's any, I've seen them where we had a part that we were sending a lot of parts to Texas to get overhauled, and because I didn't have the place where I was parting out my planes, we weren't a 145, so we had to outsource to shops that would do the EASA cert. So I always liked sending it to Texas because the team that was there, AQRD, was just really helpful and really responsive. And it's good when shops can respond to you very quickly, because then you can reply to Germany very quickly. They're like, "What's happening? What's the lead time? You said this." So if they give you a deadline, like, you've got to be on it, right? Because they'll just move on to the next vendor. So it's really nice to work with MROs that are responsive, that have that same high level standard as they do. But there's always going to be a certain amount of things either out of your control or that you would never think of. Like, we put an EOS assert on a flap bracket, and I sent it to Germany, and they found the smallest black dot, like, I mean, the size of the tip of your pen. Like, no, even the naked eye is not going to see it, essentially. And they squawked it and they sent it back. They rejected the whole part. It was like $6,000. They said, "Nope, we're not going to take it." And I thought, wow, like, wow. And we tried to tell them, well, that's not, per the manual, like, you're allowed this amount of tolerance, right? Still wasn't good enough. They just said, "Nope, we don't want it." So they didn't want to take any chances whatsoever. So I think in that scenario, it's possible maybe they had already ordered from another vendor, so they brought in three. They could have bought multiple parts at once, and they said, "No, we like this cheaper deal, better condition. We found a spec on yours. We don't want it." It could be as simple as that. We don't know. But you just never know what you're going to run into. Even with if you do everything right, it can still fall apart.
Wow.
Yeah. Something we were talking about earlier, I forgot about, I wanted to touch on. With these used parts, when you have to run them through a shop to get them recertified, one thing I think a lot of people don't realize, and you have to be careful of, is if you're running them through a shop, capabilities, a lot of people will take on a job that's actually not on their capabilities list. And that's something you have, from an industry side, from my side as a aviation inspector, I'm looking at certification. And when typically you get a Form 1 or an 8130, you don't have the information at hand as to whether that organization actually had the right to manage that part, to repair that part. But as an aviation inspector, of course, you typically have that information at hand, right? So,
Right.
So from my perspective as an inspector, what I would recommend for industry, because we all come from industry, is that when you're ordering a part from a shop, particularly a used part, it's worthwhile looking at the approval that the shop holds and whether they actually have approval for that. Because we have seen parts come up where, they have a whole raft of parts listed on their capabilities list, but this particular dash number part is not on their capability list, for instance, And in that case, that would be a case where we would reject it, an 8130 as well, and reject the part.
Yeah.
But there are, I've had a couple repair stations that I've been responsible for where that was their specialty, was obsolete parts, and they had the equipment, the tools, the most importantly, probably the publications to support the work that they were doing on that, because that's also a problem that these shops have, and it affects their capabilities, is whether they have the appropriate publications to support the work they're doing. And in a lot of cases, the OEMs were the only ones that held that information. But as the OEMs start giving up supporting those parts, they become a little freer with the documents, the publications. And so some repair stations do get their hands on these. And then now all of a sudden they can add these obsolete parts to their components list. And it may be that they become the only place in town, so to speak, where you can go get this part replaced, right? Or repaired.
Yeah, definitely. And even when I worked at a avionics shop, they were paying into ATP and other manuals, and it was like $55,000 a year worth of subscriptions to manuals. So who's to say if all of the repair shops are going to be paying that or not? A lot of times they're asking their buddy that used to work at, so and so big name shop. Hey, do you still have that CD-ROM for the Challenger from years ago? And they're like, yeah, I got it in storage, and they send it to you. I've done that, and it's incredible.
Well, yeah, and I've got a whole raft of CD-ROMs of different aircraft publications, but I couldn't tell you honestly that they're all current, and that becomes a whole another issue as well, right? So
of course, yeah.
Just one aspect I'd like to touch on, and I'm curious if you've seen this, because I've seen it a few times, and it can be an issue, and that is, you have a used part and you send it into a shop for repair, and it comes back and they update it to the latest. They use the latest publication to repair the part, and the latest revision of that publication may have a different mod status, or that may incorporate some change where the aircraft that it's going to be embodied in does not support that future change. And so technically, the part has to be repaired to not the latest publication, but rather to an earlier revision in order to go back on that aircraft. Have you seen this at all?
Yes and no. Usually they know it, like the person that's going to buy it, to be honest, like if it's a FMS and they need a certain mod status, they tell me right up front, I need XYZ mod or I cannot buy it. So right from the get-go, like before we even talk about sending it somewhere to get it bench checked or what have you, they just don't even want to take the time to even deal with it. To be honest, they're just going to stop right there and say, nope, we don't want to buy it. We're just going to find one that already has the mods done that we need specifically, and that's it. But I guess if the market were more like dried up, then and they had no choice, then yes. I have sent stuff to shops and had to explain to them, like, it's got to have exactly this. It cannot be any other way. And they're like, okay, we have you, we got it. But then there's so many, like I call it gates. Like you always want to, when you're operating with parts, you want to have a gate process. So I would have a gate process with my operations team and sort of a checklist or of what the client's needs are as well. And so by that, I mean, like, it's not going to leave my shop without I check it and then the inspector checks it and then somebody stamps it. And this is what's according to the order that they're getting. So that's why you see a lot of bad, not salesmen necessarily, but just bad logistical practices too in the industry in terms of shipping it out and disregarding whatever mods or whatever they said, and they just kind of oh, it's the alternate, they'll be fine, and they just kind of send whatever. The customer is just going to open it and reject it, and they're going to call you. Oh yeah, they're going to call you immediately and say, this is what we ordered, we're sending it back overnight today. Even if they overnighted and paid $400 for shipping, nope, we're going to send it right back. So I have seen those instances a little bit, but not like what you're saying, where it's like at the shop and we're trying to decide on that. It's usually decided before we're going to even send it out. And that's just a good practice, that if you're going to be in the aftermarket parts market, understanding your client's needs and communicating effectively as possible, reading all the little details that come in on those purchase orders, because sometimes everyone has a different way of sending a purchase order with different information. They might have the shipping is all the way at the bottom, like way down there, and then you charge them for shipping and you sent it, and then you didn't check the mod status, and so then everything is wrong. So just having a gate process is kind of the best way to counteract that.
So I'm curious. You say that usually you get on the PO, there'll be the specification. The client will specify exactly the mod status or whatever. Do you find, for the most part, most of your clients are savvy enough to do that, or do you get some orders that are just the part number?
No, a lot of orders are just part number, to be honest. And when we touch later in our discussion on aspects of learning and things like that in the industry, I think it's greatly lacking. But if a shop, what I've noticed is, if a shop is an MRO, that also buys parts, those are the kinds of shops that are really particular about paperwork. That's when you're going to see it. If it's just your everyday broker, your everyday aviation manager, a lot of times, no. I would say no. It depends. Like I was primarily in the business aviation. I never dealt with commercial side, so commercial could be different. Maybe their practices and standards are probably more that way. But in just the business jet world, it's really hit or miss. And then in GA, it can be extremely like just, you know, just as simple as a text. Hey, we want it. So, so you never know the basket of clients you're going to get. But I would say for sure, yeah, if they're overseas somewhere like the EU, I would guarantee you're going to see some pertinent information somewhere on especially if it's some kind of a purchase agreement or LOI or something like that. Oh yeah, for sure.
I have a question for you. So obviously you've been moving all kinds of different parts from a computer to maybe an engine to a life limited part. So with life limited parts, we have what we call B2B, the birth back to birth traceability. So that you have to have the history of the part, so
Right.
that you can have the exact picture of the part and the remaining cycles and stuff like that. So I suppose this is also something that you have to check out, and then so to make sure that everything fits.
Correct, yeah. So we would always get all of the logbooks from all the part out aircraft. Even the data plate, you're supposed to, at the end of life, submit the data plate back to Oklahoma, the headquarters for FAA. So you have to account for that. You have to account for having all of the camp reports run right at the time of that last flight, because what'll happen is, let's say they ran that camp report 6 months before you bought it, and then now you're going to go put some cycles on the aircraft before it finally gets to your doorstep. Well, if you're going to go make a trace based off of the camp, now you might be missing out on four landings, maybe 5 hours, 10 hours. So every single part that you put the total time and total cycles on the trace, it's technically incorrect. It's not right. And now you've given the incorrect information on to the shop that's going to go and fix it for you. And then they're going to do reports. And then now it's more incorrect reports. So it's a kind of a domino effect. So there's a huge responsibility on people that are tearing down aircraft that they may or may not be aware of. And there's tax exemptions with states too. If you're selling more than $100,000, shipping to Texas and Florida and things like that, you need to account for tail numbers being on those traceability documents and on the invoices too. So you can really get into the weeds with a lot of these topics with parts for sure.
Wow. Yeah. So how the regulatory requirements fits in all of this, how they shape the way companies approach parts procurement?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of gray area when it comes to used parts, to be honest. And you're seeing where that somebody sells something and all it has is like a tag, like a removal tag, right? And they're like, here you go. And you gotta really, you can go to the FAA, you can look at the website, you can get the resources that you need. But in terms of a template, you're not going to find a template. I've looked. You go to the FAA site and you're like, oh, I just want to get this template, because prior years ago, A&Ps would take the part off. They would make an ATA 106 on a yellow tag, fill that out, put their license number and the times and cycles, and that was like a industry standard for a very long time. Now you don't really see that anymore. That's not really a regulated thing, right? It's just that we know that before it gets installed, that the responsibility is going to the installing person. But from the FAA's point of view, everyone's guilty and you need to prove your innocence. It's the same way in the military. That's how they tell it to you. They say, you're always going to be guilty. All right. Prove your innocence. So you have to do your due diligence. You have to try to find what requirements you can on 8130s and things for air agency certificates. there's supposed to be a required set of manuals, a required set of tooling. Those need to be calibrated. The machines that are testing, that has regulatory requirement. But in terms of just a run-of-the-mill part coming off of a 172 and going to another plane, like where is that connection happening? If it's just, oh, the yellow tag, and then now that guy makes a yellow tag, like who's tracking that, right? But if there's an 8130 or there's a 337 form happening, we know the 337 forms are getting documented, going to the headquarters, getting saved in their library, and a copy is going to the owner. So there are a lot of regulatory requirements, but it's everyone's responsibility to find where it is and what it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So with I'm curious, with these used parts coming off these aircraft that are being parted out, the technical record for the aircraft, would the A&P or the 145 removing the part make an entry to that effect, that it's being removed serviceable in the aircraft's technical record?
Yeah, they'll like a great example of that is the APU log books, because when I've sold quite a few APUs, and you've got to annotate like, well, are you removing it? Are you preserving it? What procedures did you follow to remove it? Down to a T, because now when that ownership, that logbook goes with it, if that entry is not there, they shouldn't be installing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So especially with components like that, any power plant components, there's going to be its own separate logbook, and it has to be annotated, and it's got to be by an A&P. I would say specifically an IA, if at all possible, should be doing those kinds of things, or 145 shops that specifically do APUs should be following that regulation. But in the smash and grab world, some guy that has a Challenger he's parting out, it's kind of a last thought, right? It's not till the time of sale that they finally are like, oh, yeah, we need the person that actually took it off to go and fill it out. I have seen that happen, where it's not happening the same day that it was removed. Then they're filling it out later. Is that information 100% accurate? And when was that date of that camp report run? Was there a logbook entry done? Was that in there? So you're going to see a lot of gaps, especially in the Part 91 world. Private owners, I've seen lots of gaps, lots of things where the wrong dash number that was installed, that's not even applicable to that serial number plane, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go and you're like, well, who's responsible for that? You're thinking, and then you see a big name on there, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to stop where I'm at, because they're going to supersede whatever argument I have. But if it's a mom and pop shop, then yeah, definitely hold them accountable, hold people accountable, and try to be a stickler when it comes to paperwork. I think that's important. That everyone should take on that responsibility to make sure it's correct.
Right. Yeah, no, I was just thinking of examples like particularly in the small aircraft world, where you have a 172 landing gear taken off an aircraft. Technically, an entry should be made in the aircraft technical record that that the strut was removed in accordance with and the specified data, right? Because
yep.
I mean, was it taken off with a cutting torch? Was it was it
Yeah.
dropped from 30 feet and hoped that it broke off so they could use it, or what, right? So
Yep.
And Elisa had an example actually with a helicopter where there was an engine change performed on the back of a boat, but the 145 organization didn't specify what method they used, what equipment they used, anything like that. So you're left wondering, because this is something, at least in the Canadian aviation regulations, the removal has to be done in accordance with the tech record or the technical publications as well. It's not just the installation, right? Because you can damage something on removal quite easily that may not be picked up by the installer, right? So it's if you don't have a record of that, how do you say that it was removed serviceable, right? Or
right, yeah.
So I mean, as is, that's a tricky one, because well, I mean, I've seen windshields bought as is, and then you get them and maybe they fail de-icing tests for the de-icing grid or something. There's resistance tests, and maybe there's an in-service limit that's different than installing it with something that's out of in-service. Because if you're installing, for instance, a windshield, and perhaps there's an in-service limit, well, that windshield has been taken out of service, and so how can you say that it meets in-service limit and it's okay for install if it's not in service? You know what I mean? It gets a little pedantic.
Yeah, and it gets kind of dicey if the shop that's doing part outs is also certifying the parts they're removing. When they're outsourcing it, the outsourcing shop is going to do all of those things to a T, but are those shops that are doing both those things in the same building, is it being upheld to the highest standard, or are they just trying to get more money, more ROI out of what they're doing? So there is some, not everyone's doing the same practice. Some people are outsourcing the actual part out, where they'll give it to a company that in 30 days they're going to test what's in the plane and bench check, and they're going to start slapping all those traceability and filling out the technical manual, and they're going to be just certifying everything serviceable for you, and then give it to you, and then you go and sell it. So yeah, it can be it is quite it is a bit of a problem, right? Are we really looking at that one root cause of that problem with in a granular sense? And I would say no. I would say that most likely the focus is all of the incidents that are happening every day, right? And NTSB and FAA is chasing the accidents more than chasing the root causes of what's happening in the industry, and why we're seeing such a lack of conformity and a lack of quantities to put back into planes. So it's not until there's a big accident that we're going to react to it. And that's when it's already too late.
Yeah. So one question: have you ever come across a very shady part that really shouldn't be in the market? And whether you saw that or not, if you come across something like that, what do you do?
We've seen where, not necessarily that aspect where it's shady, but we've seen where the serial number is not matching the paperwork that we've received, and it came from another country, and we confronted them, and it's like, well, the plane was registered in somewhere in Mexico, and the part, the serial number looks kind of squirrely, and it's not matching the birth back to trace. And we're like, well, like, this is, your guys' responsibility, and whatever regulatory requirements you have, like, we can't take in this core that you're giving us. It's not acceptable. So we have to give it back to you and do with it what you will. And that's it. We can't have this in our country this way. I've seen that one time where it was just, we did an exchange deal. There was a really fishy sort of core that came back, and it's probably more or less just a lack of understanding, to be honest. It's just an oversight. I highly doubt that it was like something from maybe Thailand or China. I highly doubt it's like, because it's got Honeywell's names all over it, and so unless they changed the circuit boards on the inside with 4 other aftermarket models that we're unaware of that are fake, then highly doubt it. It's probably just more or less a clerical error. But I have heard, when I've talked to some senior guys, that there were problems with PMA parts, specifically in the 90s, that were coming out of China, that were bushings or bearings, things like that. Really small parts, very, very small stuff, but they were like a huge amount of quantity that were flooding in, and the FAA was trying to tackle it and go after it. And now it's not a problem, but it's already now. It's like, okay, well, did you account for all 3,000 of those bushings? Maybe not. So There's
Yeah.
always going to be a problem.
Bulk parts are a difficult one for traceability. I've seen, I don't know how many repair stations, MROs, where they get a bag of nuts or bolts or you name it. And the first thing they do is open up the bag and dump it in a bin. And the traceability is on the bag, and the traceability is now lost, right? So
Yeah, you never, so shops that are like ordering these thousands of quantities, and they have all these nice fancy U-line bins, and they just kind of throw them in, but we did have the U-line product for our shelving, and we always kept every single individual sub-assembly, everything bagged and tagged in its own bag and in a climate controlled hanger. Especially in Florida, you have really bad climate here, tropical climate. So bagging and tagging it, each individual thing. And so we had thousands of barcodes and thousands of tags, and we'd have multiple warehouses on one shelf as well. So it was very, very time consuming.
Okay.
So are you involved in consignment of parts at all, or
A little bit. My previous CEO really frowned on that. He liked to have his own thing going on, right? His own parts, his own planes, and then managing planes and reselling planes. But we would just, like, when COVID hit, yeah, we took in a couple, and we did 50% sort of splits because there's just so much overhead. It doesn't make sense to really do it. But other shops, they'll do like a 30% consignment. I know, like, Dumont pushed on a lot of parts to another shop that they sold parts for them, and then when they couldn't sell it, then they were calling me, hey, would you want to sell it? And I was like, after looking at the report, I was like, no, like, the margins are just, it's not there. So then you have a lot of people that are exiting the industry, that are retiring, and so there are obsolete stuff out there that's just sitting, and it hasn't gotten the attention it needs yet too. So yeah, I've done a little bit of consignment, but it's not the main focus. It's
right?
not really going to give you a huge ROI. It's more or less like trying to help your neighbor, so to speak.
Right. Okay.
All right. So, in your opinion, what steps a company can take to improve transparency and reduce problems in the aircraft part markets?
Yeah, definitely. If you're able to find or reach out to qualified inspectors, reach out to 145s, reach out to third-party people. I've even gone to the FAA's website and found people with certain ratings, and said, hey, would you want to come in for 5 days, and we'll pay your per diem and everything to come and train us. I've done that too. So any way possible, I would say it's best to usually try to outsource and have outside people come in, because then it's not like your friend that's trying to teach you something and you might take it a certain way. It's, I have this person that has a badge, that has a license, that has they have a package for you ready to go, that that's their niche part of the market. That's what they do. So outside of just consulting other professionals, it's to find those third parties to come in to train people. We did that with our ERP software. We needed to get people to get all of that data into the software, thousands of lines of inventory and conditions and all of this pertinent information. So we did that 2 or 3 times, where we had a team of 1 to 2 guys that came in that were either software developers or managers that would come in and just okay, let's just knock it out. Let's do 40 hours. It's worth the investment tenfold, because now you're going to eliminate the amount of questions you're going to have on a daily basis, and they have a help team to go and talk to. They're not just going to leave and say good luck. They're going to say, here's my card, here's my number. You want to do more Teams meetings, Teams chats, call us and we'll help you. So find those qualified people that's all they do.
Yeah. So what about AI? How do you see AI impacting this?
Yeah, to be honest, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, because now we're talking about sentient AI, general what is it, AGI, right? General intelligence as well. It's progressing at a rate of every 6 months. Every 6 months, it's progressing, and it's very rapid. So I believe that, in my sense, from my point of view, my opinion, I would say either in 5 years or at least less than the next 10 years, every company is going to need an AI manager. Um, that's my own opinion. Take it for what you will, but I think that what we're seeing is that we're seeing right now is sort of like AI chatbots coming in, scheduling your meeting, right? But in the sense of a salesperson and having a sales rep, an account rep, and a customer success manager, all of that can go away. You can get rid of all of that and just mold them into one AI manager. And you can even get rid of sending POs back and forth. I mean, you could literally implement new software to where, and this isn't really much of a thing yet, at least to my knowledge, but I was thinking about this recently and thinking, well, you could have the plane talk to an AI market, right? So as soon as something's happening in flight, it talks to the market, just as your car OBD sensor would be throwing a code. In flight, it's throwing that code to the market, and then the AI manager is producing, let's say the work order. Then by the time it's grounded, there's not a bunch of tech scrambling to go see what it is. It's already talking to the market, so it's working in the reverse role. So instead of like they've landed, they're pulling the part, they're assessing what's going on. The A&P is talking to the IA is talking to the DOM is talking to the purchasing manager. That person, goes to place the order with the guy with the third party on parts base, and then he waits, and then 2 days nothing happens, or they do get the PO, then they get the parts, the wrong part. I was at the expo this year, and there were some guys trying to implement blockchain, and they were trying to implement all of the trace from birth up till present day using blockchain technology. So if you combine their idea with what I'm talking about with creating an AI-driven market that doesn't exist yet, with planes talking to the market, with managers managing the requests, you're talking about eliminating so much wasted time. It's just you can't even really fathom how fast that you could have a part. It'd be like you're driving your truck and your truck's like, uh-oh, this isn't right. And then all of a sudden it says, okay, take a right in 3 miles, and your part is ready to pick up at said repair shop, right?
Mhm.
So we have the tech there, but the market's always like, the industry, I should say, not the market, but the industry itself is always 10 years behind, is what people tell me. But now we're getting to that point where in a couple years, we're going to have this general intelligence that's so powerful that they could do probably half the jobs an A&P could do and just go grab the part and put it in the plane.
Yeah, very interesting. And I kind of like it because you can also cut a lot of paperwork. But on the other side, okay, so what are we going to do? Are we going to just go all on vacation?
Yeah.
And
Well,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I always play devil's advocate, and okay, so your computer's down. Now what?
yeah, and there is
Yeah.
always the problem of the hackers. Anyways, it's a bigger rabbit hole that
Yeah.
unfortunately we don't have the time, but it would be a very good conversation. And yeah, I can see that becoming the future, actually. We are getting close to the end of our interview, and I would like for you to talk about your patent.
Yeah, of course. So before I discuss on that, will touch on the subject of why I sort of was thinking of this. And when you watch the news every week, what do you see? You see like emergency hatches and parts falling off of planes, right? Big incidents. And you think, what was the root cause? You know, uh, how many bad steps do we have to lead up to that point? And people would tell you it's quality. Most likely it's a quality issue, right? They didn't check it. They didn't follow procedure. So the idea behind the patent is it's the methodology and process of reverse engineering parts and producing them. So any part in existence, I would be able to create a replica of the part. But why would you want to do that? Well, there's too much red tape that we know with the FAA, they're not going to allow that. unless I went and got approval from OEM and FA and things like that. But I thought, well, the bedrock of learning seems to be an issue where we need to start first. And by that, I mean, let's say you go to an A&P course that's 2,100 hours, or you're going to be majoring in aeronautics or aviation management for 4 or 5 years. So in that span of let's say, call it 4 years, one aircraft is comprised of 50,000 part numbers, maybe more, maybe a little less. But in 4 years, a qualified A&P is exposed to less than 1% of that. They're exposed to physically the part, less than 1%. So the idea behind that patent is you're in a classroom setting, and what normally happens, the instructor says, oh, I have this model. When I give it to you, you pass it around. There's not enough, it's too expensive. So they're going to take the part, pass it, you see it for 60 seconds, and it goes to the next guy. Well, if I want emerging technology, let's say a wing with a flap on it, it's $100,000. I can't put that in front of 50 students.
Mm-hmm.
I can't put that into the hands of 50 students. And with being able to reverse engineer it specifically for educational purposes, now I can put any part in existence into the hands of every student in the world, right? So now their budgets, let's say like one school I talked to, their budget was $600,000 for a startup school. Well, let's say they bought landing gears like they need 25 landing gears. I'm like, hey, that's going to be at least $250,000 just for core landing gears. And what condition are you getting them, and how old is that tech, right? So you look at like Cirrus, that brand, and you see all these composite materials, all this fancy stuff. I've worked on the SR-22s and the VisionJet. You've got some some pretty advanced technology in this machine, but if you go to an A&P course, are you going to be able to take that composite, the design, and the functionality, how it articulates, to the hands of all those hundreds of students, thousands of students? There's no way. There's just no way. So it's not only reverse engineering it, it's being able to produce all of those things, being able to demonstrate all the nomenclature, and have it articulate and function just as it would a real part. And you might say, well, that's not legal. It is, because it's a non-airworthy part, and it has a capacity blocker attached to it. So that's part of how we wrote it, was that you cannot install that part onto any aircraft in existence. It has a capacity blocker installed on it at the point at which where it does install to the aircraft. So that means it's a non-airworthy replica component used for educational purposes, and you can make a replica copy of anything in existence. So that was the thing, is that I wanted to help the bedrock of every student that's going to have that exposure to the tangible item. If you go to Embry-Riddle, go to a big university, it's all theory, it's video, maybe it's some fancy engines and some test cells, but are they really going to get the latest and greatest into the physical hand of the tangible object? I would say no, definitely no.
So in my mind, I mean, it sounds interesting. When you say you can replicate any product, do you not first have to have access to each and every product in order to replicate it?
Yep, indeed, yes, you would, and you would need an engineer, which I've looked into that, and I've talked with the engineer, and I've talked to a rapid prototyping person here in Florida as well. So yeah, there is a lot of parts to it. You know, you need CAD software. You need the STL files if you're going to 3D print it. You'll need a CNC machine if you're going to produce it via a CNC machine. You'll need some kind of tangible object to scan. So we've encapsulated all of that process, as well as all those parameters, in like a 40-page summary with like 30 plus claims for the examiner to go through. So it's a really in depth the way it's written, but the process is simple. It's technology that already exists, processes that already exist, and it's things that like big companies, big OEMs are already starting to do. They're already starting to 3D print blades, turbine blades for engines. It's already happening.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
you're not seeing that in an A&P school. You're not seeing 3D printed blades in schools. There's no way. So that's part of it, is I want to shorten the gap and I want to improve the bedrock of learning. So let's start with retraining people's brains, right, to have that recognition, that memory muscle recognition, that when they're out there on the flight line, they're going to say, "Oh, I remember seeing that, and it was
Mhm.
color coded. It was like a yellow gear, and it moved, and it had this scissor link with that part."
Mhm.
You know, they're going to
Mhm.
have that brain memory of it. It's going to be imprinted in their brain somewhere, because your brain is capable of retaining thousands of bits of information. And it's just, you're going to have that recall memory like that, and
Mhm.
that's going to help fix those bigger problems, at least in my mind.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, also because nowadays technology is moving very, very fast. We were talking
Extremely
about
fast.
AI, and I would say kind of finally, because I sometimes I feel like aviation is still stuck in the medieval sometimes. So I
Yeah.
think it's really important. It's a very interesting project and important for young AME people to say, "Oh, okay, I can deal with the new technology kind of right away. I mean, at least I can understand what I have in front of me."
It's not even for just for the new AME. I mean, I liken this to flight simulators for pilots. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm going for type training as an A&P or as an engineer, and I can have all of the pieces right in front of me as though and the other piece to that as well is you don't have to worry about flicking a switch or dropping it or I mean, of course, there's a cost to it, but it's not the real thing, and that's the
Mhm.
whole one of the points of a learning environment is you can make those mistakes, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
they're
of
not
course. Yeah.
catastrophic.
And the tactile, you know, the material, it's open to anything. It could be a
Yeah.
polymer, it could be metal, it could be whatever is most cost effective to produce that training module. That's part of it too. So you look at what's out there right now. I saw some of the test cells and training dollies that we had set up with hydraulics and things, and those were like $85,000. I'm talking about making things for, let's say, less than $5,000. That way it caters to their budget, whether the school is state regulated or a major university. They're going to be able to afford to have access to all this stuff, because you could produce a giant 6-foot part. Let's say it's maybe $200 with the PLA material, versus the same size, same part that's $250,000. So
Right.
I think that's the thing, is cost when it comes down to
Mhm.
learning, is budgets
Oh,
are
for
tight.
sure.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
how do we cater to that budget? But it's not so much, it's not to make, it wasn't, I didn't see it as a way to try to make money out of it one day. I know that it can, and it could be very lucrative. It was just that I saw a problem that needed to be fixed. And I think it's a persistent thing, right? And it's with anything. Like if you're a car mechanic, if you're going to go learn about boats, all those instructors are just going to have a couple of models laying around for you to see. You're not going to see the real thing till you really get out there in the world. So their education, the value of what they're paying, is going to be enhanced by having more of that in front of them as well. They're
Mhm.
Yeah.
getting more
Yeah.
bang for their buck. So that's how I think of it in that term too. And the reason I even thought of it, even came up with it, was because I went to the dentist one day, believe it or not, and they had a scanning tool that scanned my teeth, and it created a 3D augmented image of the inside of my mouth, and they were able to manipulate it. And so I kept thinking about the scanner, and I was thinking about the parts, and I thought, wow, I could just reverse
Yeah.
engineer that. And I know that this is a problem I see from when I was coming up, and I could fix a huge problem, right? So
Mhm.
now it has me thinking, like what you said about AI and what other people are saying, that I think there's going to be a shift in the market, and there needs to be a shift in the learning curve too.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, I don't know how patent works. So, at which stage of the process are you with this?
So let's see. So I filed October last year. Typically, it's about 22 months average. I've heard 18 months. is where we're at. And then so right now it's assigned to an examiner. It's essentially it has to go through a series of the claims that we're staking. So the way my lawyer puts it, because I hired a patent attorney, which I think everyone should do for their first patent, is that he says, okay, this is the flag, this is where we're going to stake our claims. And so in these series of claims, we're writing it very, very broad. And so in that sense of like, we'll be able to say that it's cost effective for students. We'll be able to say that it's not an airworthy part. We'll be able to say that it's made out of a different material than the original. We'll be able to claim that it has a capacity blocker, so it can't be installed. So right now it's still in the inspection phase. Anything technology related or like even aviation for that matter, those patents could take a very long time. The examiner is going to have to go through and his job is to try to contest every single claim. Then it gets narrowed down to like a few things, and then they say, okay, you're allowed to do X, Y, Z, or it could, let's say it's 100%. Every claim you made is perfectly standard and accurate. So we wrote it to being a twofold. So that way it covers the methodology processes of reverse engineering these parts, but it also covers actually producing them and producing non-airworthy components, specifically for education. So because it's for education, because it has capacity blockers, all of that, we're like, I would say about halfway in to this process. And once it starts to kind of narrow, once the tunnel, we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, my attorney is going to come back to me and say, okay, I'm going to bat for you for XYZ claims, and this is what's approved now. And right now they're asking, would you like to file in 125 countries as well? So that's an option. It's called PCT. So then people in other countries wouldn't be able to produce it. Only I would have the exclusivity to do it. So right now I'm kind of on the fence with that because I want everyone to have access to everything. I don't want to be like the only guy that says, well, I'm the only one that can do it. Like, right? Like I want everyone to do it. And one thing that my attorney has suggested is why don't we franchise the idea, right? And then give it to all the schools and then say, hey, in your classroom environment, you can use this to produce it. Instead of just me outsourcing it or me making it, giving it to you, we can say, here's the tools, here's the code, put it into your machine, produce the part in live time in front of them, and you can use it for training. So it's now they're learning a lot of different things. Now they're learning how to reverse engineer a real part. Now they're learning how it's physically made and how it looks and feels and all of the nomenclature and subassemblies attached to it. So now it's on them to go and learn, right?
Yeah.
So he likes to think of it from that standpoint, and I like to think of it from just all of the above. Whatever I could do to help the industry. I would like to be able to file a patent every single year. I would like to be able to solve real world problems all of the time, and I think that's important. The world really we need people thinking like that. We need to shift our way of thinking into, well, not just to say, well, we're only seeing this incident in the news. We're not hearing, oh, we're going to solve it because of this is we don't see the conclusion later on. We just, every week we see planes crashing and people getting injured. We don't see the positivity side. We don't see and hear about people trying to fix the root causes of those problems.
Yeah.
Proactively.
Proactively, exactly. We're not
Right.
we're not seeing that, and we need to see more of that. And if you go and walk the floor at MBAA or something like that and talk to all those people, they're going to be pushing their product down your throat or trying to become friends and network with you. But are they talking about the problems that they're having and how they're solving them? Are they saying, hey, that maybe not. I've talked to other vendors and they're like, oh yeah, we shipped another part to the wrong place. Oh, we did this and that. Oh, what are you guys doing to fix it? So some shops they asked me that. They're like, well, Nick, how'd you fix it? How did you guys fix so many problems? And what I say is, like, we just refined it over and over and over, and we put it to a vote as a team. So to put that into perspective, the outcome was going from selling 50,000 a month to selling $500,000 a month, right? But we would have never gotten there without collaborating together as a team, putting our heads down and just addressing every gate in the process, every micro decision that a company is making. So that's a whole nother learning aspect that I don't think that's patentable necessarily. but we could patent some tools. We could patent something, right? You can't really patent a course, but you could patent something to get into the hands of them that's going to spark their interests into learning, wanting to learn, right? And that's what we need. We need things that are going to captivate our audience so that they want to learn.
Absolutely. And with this, we conclude with what kind of advice would you give to young professionals? I heard you at the beginning of the interview saying, I wanted to invest in myself. So you're also an entrepreneur. So what kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, I would say just, I don't want to sound cliche and say like follow your dreams. I would just say like do what's best for you at the time, but always think about what the next best opportunity is in front of you and act on it. So, it's always good to aspire to the next greatest chapter of your life, but enjoy the time that you're at in the present, but keep working little by little towards that next step. So if you're not happy with where you're at and what you're doing, that's okay. Just know that it's just one chapter of a huge series of books, and you can go out and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Nicholas. So where people can find you if you want to share your LinkedIn or email, whatever you like, we are going to write in the interview all your contact.
Yeah, of course, they can just look me up on LinkedIn. Just look up Nick Bock. It'll say Sales Manager, Aviation Inventor, or my Gmail is just nicholasr.bock@gmail.com. So anyone is welcome to email me or reach out on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to network with anybody that wants to sit and chat.
Okay, perfect. Well, Nicholas, thank you so much. This was a great interview, a great discussion. We touched on a lot of little things that I didn't even think about.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank
you, Nicholas. Thank you so much.